Okay, that's now. Yeah, we have to turn
Hello.
on.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Look at us. We got it.
But this is an intimate conversation.
It's
Y'all
real
can hear us
intimate.
without these mics.
Do we-
Christine, I'm so happy to be here to celebrate you in this incredible book.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be in conversation with you tonight. This is a conversation because, as Ramunda said, Helena is a brilliant journalist, a woman that I have admired for a very long time. And it is women like Helena that this book is actually dedicated to. Because Black women journalists, we need y'all, we love y'all, we appreciate y'all. And I really wanted to celebrate that in this series.
Christine, you're going to make me cry. This isn't about me. This is your book. No, but I will say, in reading the book, literally, I was like, is this for me? Like seriously, it is about, we'll get into like the plot line of it, but in reading it to the serious journalist glasses, I was like, are you spying on me? But no, it was just an incredible book. But I want to talk about just the topic of journalism,
Yes.
right? And why you thought that was important to teach, because the book teaches, and that's another thing I thought that was incredible about it.
Thank you.
Just terms that are like, okay, opinions, facts.
Yes.
Those are different, guys. Right? But the book makes that so clear for the 6 to 8 audience. And why was that important to you?
You know, when I first started writing this series, I'll be honest, media literacy wasn't the focus of it. I really wanted to write a series where kids had an opportunity to talk about news that was important to them, that allowed me to use language and terminology and explain things that they may be hearing in passing, right? Because oftentimes we talk over children, or we assume they're not listening, or that they don't understand, and they're trying to figure it out. And the more I got into writing the series, I was like, oh, this is about media literacy, right? And the more educators and librarians that I spoke with, they were like, there's nothing for our students to teach media literacy. And we really have to start building these skills at a young age, right?
Say that again.
The statistics are staggering and embarrassing, quite honestly. The fact that I think it's 50% of middle schoolers can't tell the difference between an actual factual news story and an ad.
But you said middle schoolers. How about 50% of adults?
Exactly.
Grown-ups?
Right.
Who can't tell the difference between, right? There was just a news story about if you ask Alexa whether the last election was stolen, she is quoting all sorts of news organizations and saying that, yes, it was, right? Just this, yes. Right. And I was like, ooh, yes. Like, this is actually happening. So the
Yeah.
idea that adults are falling for this.
Yeah.
So we should equip our children. Hopefully, a friend of mine, David Johnson, says, teach the babies. The children will be leading us, right?
And hopefully these are skills. I wrote this series in a way in the hopes that they can build upon this knowledge over time. This morning I had my first 3 classroom visits.
Ooh.
And oh my goodness, the kids were so into it. They were so into it, and they were so ready to talk about what was a fact and what was an opinion. They were telling all their parents' business, honey. I mean, everything was news. I got news, and I'm like, okay, so let's talk about privacy. But we had some really great conversations. And it just allowed me to see, I know what this series is going to do for children. I know how it's going to help educators. I know how it's going to help parents, and hopefully, in the long run, help society, right? Because the readers of the Frankie and Friends series, that's 6 to 8, that's the next generation. That's the next
Absolutely.
generation of journalists.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I love that. And it's funny because I've done a career day or two. And how excited, I mean, even preschoolers who will come in, and how excited kids are, not only I feel the thing about journalism, why I love it and why I've done it for 20 years, is that it's very empowering. It's this idea that I can find out the information. You know,
Yes.
I can FOIA. You know,
Yes.
I can find out this information. I don't have to wait for someone to tell it to me and, you know, synthesize it in some sort of strange way. Like, I am empowered. And when you talk to kids about that and they're like, oh, I can just open my notebook and go up to someone and ask them questions, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and it builds confidence in this
were
way.
so
That's
excited.
so incredible to see.
They were so excited this morning. I told them all that they are all members of the Citizen Press, which means they have responsibilities
Yes.
as citizens to share news that is factual, right? To do their research, to ask questions, right? These are building critical thinking skills
Yes.
in young folks, right?
Yes.
And then I had them all yell out, "No fake news." They were like, "No fake news," you know, but really getting them to understand and talk about what harm fake news can do, right? I said, listen, you don't do your research. You report on something that's an opinion. We talked about citing sources. They love that as well.
Oh, you went deep.
I went deep with the babies, and they got it. And this idea that they could circulate information that could be harmful, I mean, they just were like, we are not doing that, right? So I
Right.
think so much of it is meeting young people where they are. They are fully capable
Absolutely.
of doing this work.
And having the moral center, right?
Absolutely.
And understanding, you know, right from wrong, and in building community. And that's the one thing, again, that I love about journalism, because it roots you in your community.
Yes.
Right? And wanting to understand what's going on the street or down the block, right? In journalism, we talk often about the third place where people just gather, like the library, where you
Yeah.
can meet different and new people. And what I loved about the book was this curiosity that Frankie had.
Yeah.
And especially, again, I've got two girls there. One is back there with her grandma, one's there sitting with dad. And curiosity is something that I just deeply want to pour into my children, because you
Yes.
have that, right? I remember, I think it was Diane Sawyer said this during like a documentary she did, that is the thing for journalists. If I'm curious,
Yes.
I have questions about what's happening around me, I don't just take things as they are. But instilling that in a child, instilling that in a little girl,
Yes.
instilling that in a little black girl.
know.
Like, it's just like, it's like an overload in the book. I love that about the book.
I'm so glad. No, it was all very intentional. I mean, even to the point where her mother is an award-winning journalist, and she wants to be like her mother, right? And her father works from home. I don't even talk about what he does. It doesn't matter.
He
what
worked
does.
down in the basement,
worked in the
y'all.
basement.
He worked in the basement somewhere.
There are glass doors. She can see him all as well, right? Like, but this idea, you know, even talking about gender roles,
Yes.
you know, and dynamics at this age, it's so important for a lot of young readers to see their lives on the page of this book. And it can't just always be the same repetitive narrative
Exactly.
that we're giving young people. You know, when you mentioned the curiosity piece, it made me think about Frankie's friends, which are part of her news crew. And they are all very curious, and they are all characters with very different personalities. And Dan, the teddy bear, is
Also the cameraman.
also the cameraman. So Dan has ADD, y'all. Right?
Is that why he's kind of pinging?
Yes, and he's
Okay.
very forgetful. But if you notice in the text, Dan is always right.
He is.
He gets it right.
And folks are kind of like, that was
Should
a good
we
idea,
trust
Dan.
Dan?
Yeah.
Dan don't remember nothing, you know? And Dan is right? I want kids, even with learning challenges, to see themselves represented on the page and doing empowering things, right? And being equally curious. Dan is just as curious as everyone else. He may get distracted by the cat on the windowsill, right? But he's like, didn't your teacher say? Didn't your dad say? Right? Like, he remembers those things that are grounding and important to the story.
And I love that when you said that it kind of clicked, but that's never stated in the text, right?
No.
It's never stated in the text. And when you mentioned the friends, because one of the things that beyond all of the sort of newsroom terms you have throughout the book, which I think are incredible, and then you explain the terms, if we're talking about teaching at the end of the book, that brainstorming session I love so much because, again, you want to talk about critical life skills, this idea that, I mean, it's like, what, 6 of them in the meeting, 8 of them in the meeting, where they're sitting around and they're discussing, well, what should the story be? And someone says, I think it should be this.
Breaking news story
I think it should be that. And just in teaching kids how to respect one another's opinions, how to give each other the floor, how to like speak up and say, hey, debates. I had this idea.
Healthy
just
debate.
That was so incredible, right? Especially in that age group, I think, where kids they've got a voice, right? They have opinions, deep opinions. I have a 6-year-old. But the idea that they can like speak them out loud and feel confident in a safe environment to do that with their friends, that in and of itself I thought was so empowering.
Thank you. You know, it was so funny this morning as I'm reading through the list and telling children what their responsibilities are as members of the Citizen Press. They're all very proud, by the way.
Did they get badges?
They got badges. They have badges. And I'm going through there, and one of them was, like I mentioned, cite your source. So everything else where I said, does anyone know what a fact and versus and everyone's like, I know, you know. But when I got to cite your source, no hands. This 3rd grade. I said, does anyone know what I mean by cite your source? No. And I told them I was very proud of them for not pretending like they knew, right? And so the way I explained it was, I said, so I'm an author, and let's say I recite a poem that says, the sky is blue, this much is true. And I pointed to one student, and I say, now let's say you like that poem, and you want to share that poem with another person, right? And you say, and so I pointed to the child, she's like, the sky is blue, this much is true. I said, girl, those my words. You have to cite your, you know, and you saw like their light bulbs go off, right? Where you say, listen, citing the source is a way for you to acknowledge if it's not an original idea, if it belongs to someone else, you have to cite that source. And they got it.
I love that.
5 seconds worth of conversation. So this idea that this age group is incapable of learning media literacy is ridiculous. They are so ready. They love it.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to this debate about what children can learn, and when I was researching my book and we were talking about racism, and there was this great study, again, citing sources. I'm going to forget the name of the study, but it was not, my study. But one of the authors of it, she said, listen, we know children can't understand calculus.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we don't teach them 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
We start them somewhere, right? We give them a foundation that they can build on. This idea that is like, oh no, hard news. Obviously, I don't think your children should be watching CNN tonight.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you can't show them a news story.
Right.
And have them read, a human interest story. Again, another topic. So many of these great glossary terms that you have. Human interest story, and have them read it about a dog that was lost at the park, right? And them understand what that means and that how it helps community and all of those things. I think you're absolutely right. And what excites me so much about this book, that saddens me about this industry I've been in for so long, there used to be a time at the Post where we had a thing called Kids Post, right? These amazing pages that were all for kids that, kids would read them at home, read them in school. Don't have it anymore because the business is shrinking, right? And so I think IP like this, properties like this are so important because we are not passing the buck a little bit, but understanding that we all as a society need to be invested in teaching our children these skills. As we say at the Post, democracy dies in darkness.
Yeah, it's
right?
so true. And what my hope for this series is what happened in one of the classrooms this morning. They're starting a student newspaper.
Yes.
Like, they were ready.
Yes.
They had their press badges, like they're ready. And I do, when you mentioned that, it made me think, growing up, we did have those things that were very much tailored to young people that explained that, getting highlights and, just certain things that were very much tailored to educating us on the world that we were entering into. And I feel like, I don't know if we're necessarily doing that good of a job right now.
We are not. I will tell you.
So I do take this series very seriously. It's something that I'm really excited about. Frankie and her friends, they report on news that is big and small. And so, again, it's an opportunity to talk about some of those hard news topics, right? Mm-hmm. You were mentioning young people watching the news. Sometimes they're not watching. Sometimes they're just passing by. Sometimes y'all are sitting in a restaurant, right? When I asked one of the classrooms this morning, has anyone seen or heard any news lately? The first thing was the war. I said, yeah, that's hard news. That's an example of hard news, right? And we had a very wonderful dialogue about hard news. And what should they hear? And what should they do? And what questions should they ask? Because they're curious, right? It could have been in a restaurant.
Right.
And it just breaking news came on. War broke, and all they hear is war. What does that mean? They're looking at the screen, So understanding that this age group in particular is very much.
They're always listening.
They are always listening.
The ears are on.
As they used to say back in the day, little pitchers have big ears. They have they are little pitchers with big ears. And so, we want to fill those big ears, right? With accurate information. We want to empower them as readers, as members of the citizen press. I mean, I feel slightly bad for some of the parents because, they're about to be reporting on everything. I
love it.
Okay? They were like, yes. But to your point, it is about community. Frankie and Friends, when I first went to write the series, it was pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic hit. And they
changed
said,
everything.
We don't know when children are going back to school. Because she was going to be doing stuff at school. And so she ended up just having to report on things right there in her home and in her community, because that's where children were, right? But to your point, being a member of the Citizen Press is about reporting on news in your community. And I have already started to receive some Instagram DMs of parents with their kids with binoculars on, looking at, they're curious. We call it nosy, but they are curious.
It's nosy, and that's fine. Listen, but nothing's wrong with being nosy.
Nothing is wrong with being nosy.
And that's why I tell kids when I go speak to kids too, I'm like, listen, if you're naturally nosy, you like to know people's business, become a journalist. You do it and they pay you for it. You get to ask people these questions. And you're like, oh, but I'm doing that. I'm asking for the Washington Post.
Yeah.
You mentioned parents, which I thought was so interesting, because as you talked about these things about what kids hear that we might not know, I think another great piece of the book is parents reading it themselves, right? Yeah. Obviously companion reading, but reading it themselves and thinking, okay, hard news, this is a term I can talk about. Facts versus opinions, this is something I can explain.
Open-ended questions.
Open-ended questions. Yes, so many just gems that, again, as parents, with the hard topics, you hope the kids aren't watching the news. You hope they're not listening, but we know they are.
Yeah.
And how do we discuss it with them, and how do we make it digestible on their level? And the book is just a guidebook to that.
Thank you.
It absolutely is.
Thank you. Book 2 is, thank you. Book 2 in the series comes out in May, and it's called The Big Protest. because no one is talking to these babies about protest and what is happening and what does it mean, right? No one is having conversations about citizen participation, right? Getting them to understand what is literally happening, not only around them, but to them within their own communities, right? And so again, I hope this series allows parents to have the language and tools, you know, to really talk about some of these things, but then also keep it light. I mean, there is another book in the series called The Missing Sock. Because is it the washer or the dryer that's eating that
Or
extra
is it the
sock?
gnome that lives in the house that eats up all the
Someone is
socks?
getting that sock, right? You know? And so this is an opportunity for her to do some investigative reporting, you know? And you can make it fun, right? You know, there's a part in that book in particular that always makes me laugh because Dan is my friend, obviously. I just adore this.
You love Dan.
I adore this character because I get to be so silly with him. And Frankie says, I'm going to go undercover, you know? And Dan is like, why would you go under the covers? It's dark under there. It's scary. She's like, no, fool, you know?
Right.
Like, so it's an opportunity because that's what kids that age think. They hear undercover, and if it's not explained to them, they're like, oh, man, people go under the covers to cover news stories. That's wild, you know? And so it's also an opportunity to flush out some of this terminology.
Yes.
And allow them, to your point, empower them to use it and understand.
And with the knowledge, to do it properly, right? To
Yes.
be proper journalists, which I love. Another topic I want to get to that's in the book that I find so incredible, obviously it is about Frankie being hurt. And I love how she's like, award-winning journalist Frankie. It's like, girl, you ain't won no awards yet, but you better claim it. I love it. And but not to give anything away, but the sister relationship, again,
Yes.
I have two girls. This book was literally written for me. I cannot wait to read this with my daughters, but about the sister relationship and two sisters sort of, you know, commiserating together, even though they've kind of like been apart for a little bit because the older sister's a teenager now and doing
Yes.
teenager things, and Frankie like doesn't know where she fits in. That story is so sweet. And why was that specifically something you wanted to dive into?
You know, in the same way that I wanted to really address Frankie's mother having to leave sometimes, right? I want kids to be able to tap into their emotions, you know, because again, I think that's another area that's unexplored with young people. We see them as either happy and playful or sad, you know, and upset, you know. They have a full range of emotions.
They are humans, yes.
They are little humans, you know? And so I really wanted to explore that little sibling, older sibling dynamic and how hard that can be sometimes, you know, for the younger sibling. There's a part in the book where Frankie is, you know, sort of just acknowledging the scene, and she's like, oh, Raven's door is closed, you know? And she remembers when Raven's door used to be opened all the time, but now she has to knock, you know? That's hard for little kids. You know what I mean? And so I want them to be able to tap into that emotion, you know? I want them to be able to maybe even go to their older sibling and say, hey, this happened in Frankie, and I kind of feel the same way. You know, can we talk about that? But then also showing that dynamic where Raven, her older sister, she finds out I'm a little older, but we're both here in this together, right?
Yes, I love that part because it was like, yes, Raven is the teen and has now stepped into her 13-year-old sophistication, but recognizing herself that like, you're still a little girl.
Yeah.
You know, you're still a little girl. You still have little girl feelings. You still can get silly with your little
Yes.
sister.
Yes.
And that was just so sweet and
Thank
heartwarming to
you.
me. I love
Thank
that piece of the
you.
book. Before I open up, because I'm sure folks have questions, you dedicate the book to Alice Dunnigan.
Yes.
And I want you just to talk briefly about who Alice Dunnigan is and why it was important for you to say her name, write her
Yes.
name, dedicate the book to her.
So she is the first Black woman journalist to receive White House press credentials.
Yes.
And she was a name that I had never heard of until I started researching this book.
Wow.
And it just made me think of the countless Black women journalists who have paved the way, right? Even for us to be in conversation tonight.
There's
and-
no Abby Phillips without Alice Dunnigan. There is no April Ryan
There's
without
none.
Alice Dunnigan. No.
And I just thought, how could I have never heard her name before? How come I'm a historian? How have I never heard this name? And so I really wanted to honor her with this first book. And I want people to see that name and say, I never heard of her. Who is that? And I want them to look her up because she has a list of accolades, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely. She was
Phenomenal.
writing for her local paper when she was in elementary school or middle school or
just
something.
a phenomenal story, you know. And so that's why I wanted to. I want people to know and say her name because she has paved the way not just for Black women journalists, but I think for Black writers in
Absolutely.
general. And so yeah, that's why I dedicated it to her.
That was incredible, honestly. Like when I saw her name, I was like, "What is this?" Because you're right. It's not a name a lot of people know. Ida B. Wells. Not everybody knows Ida B. Wells, but people know Ida B. Wells, but they don't know
Yeah.
sort of the folks who were fighting on just a granular level. She was also one of the first Black women to enter the congressional
Right.
press court. You know,
and also like in a portrait gallery, isn't there like a press portrait gallery or something? She was like the first Black woman that was in. I mean, like an illustrious career.
Absolutely.
And had never heard of her. And so I'm hopeful that people will do a Google search and be just as amazed and in awe as
we'll
I
be
was.
curious. We'll be curious.
We want them to be
Yeah.
curious.
Absolutely. Christine, thank you so much. This was incredible.
you.
This book, Frankie and Friends, breaking news. So questions folks might have for Christine, author of 30 books.
Yes. Hi. Oh wait, there's a.
We're going to give you a mic.
Yeah, you know, I think that happens to a lot of young children actually, and not even just in the area of news. I think just in general. As you know, I used to do a lot of anti-racism, DEI work, and so much of the pushback would come from parents and well-meaning caregivers simply because they were uncomfortable or they felt like they didn't have the answers. And what I would often tell adults in some of these workshops and trainings, they thought they were, I thought we were here to talk about unconscious bias. I'm like, ha ha, gotcha, you know? I would tell them it's okay to say, I don't know.
Oh, yes.
It's okay to tell young people, that's a question that I have too. Maybe we should go research that together. You know, I think so much of it comes from adults feeling like they have to have the answer, and if they don't have the answer, then they're going to look incompetent, or, you know, or they have the answer and the answer is really hard and difficult, and they don't want to pop this bubble that is going to get popped anyway, right? And so this is an opportunity to really explain things in childlike terms, right? Always remember that this is education and information that is being built upon over time, right? When I talk about protest in the book, we're not going all the way there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is an introduction, right? They have a toy protest. They have the toys protest, you know? But it's a way to teach what citizen participation looks like. It's a way to talk about how you show your stance on something, right? How you support others, how it looks to be an ally, right? It's an introduction. It is not Protest 101, you know, at GW, you know? And so I think, you know, to a young child, I would say, you know, adults don't have all the answers. I know you think we do, but we don't have all the answers. And so if you ask an adult in your life a question about this book, or there's something in here that you're curious about, and they don't have the answer, it's okay. You know, you can ask another adult, you can research it on your own, right? And kids love knowing that adults don't have all the answers. You know, and I would just keep it simple and honest.
Absolutely.
Works best with children.
And I would also say, I mean, for me, one, because I think your question also has to do with the fact that it is very easy as an adult, and especially as a parent, to just like shut it down and be like, I don't have time for questions today. Sorry, no questions. You know, it's like a congressional hearing. You're just like running out of it. And I think one of the things is, one, you're right. I tell my girls all the time, I was like, Mommy knows a lot of things. Okay, Mom is very smart. Mommy knows a lot of things. I was like, but I do not know all the things, right? But beyond that, also teaching kids when to approach with questions, right? Because when I am trying to answer a work email, plus cook, plus do this other thing, and you're like, Mommy, I want to know all this. I was like, oh, girl. So it is like when to approach with questions, right? Which is a good journalistic tool to have, right? You know when you should ask someone a question, when it's a quiet moment where you can sit and actually really talk. And another thing I teach my girls is like to write things down, to like think about the questions that they have before, right? Because my 6-year-old is now like writing and reading and just like, like just knowing when to ask the question and which questions to ask. So that your adult is receptive. But then also us as adults just recognizing that, you know, kids are very curious all the time, and when you want to really lean into that curiosity. Not at 10 p.m.,
right?
Not when it's bedtime.
Not at 10 p.m.
No.
It's so funny. I don't want to give the story away. I was gonna read something, but it made me think about, as you know, in the story with what's going on with Raven. And Frankie and her friends are having this discussion of whether they should go interview Raven, right? And one friend is saying, I mean, maybe she just wants to be left alone. And another friend is saying, I mean, I would want somebody to support me. And another friend, you know what I mean? Like, again, is this the right time? What should we do? How do we approach this? These are all critical thinking skills that all of us should have. I also love that you tell your girls, Mommy's really smart. Mommy doesn't know everything. And I would always also say, no one knows everything. Just so like, you know, it ain't just your mama don't know everything. Like nobody knows everything. But it's very empowering. And it just lets you off the hook for so much, right? Like this, it's such an unfair responsibility to think that we should have to supply all the answers to questions and scenarios that are happening in real time.
Listen, do you know the difference between a buffalo and a bison?
Ooh.
I don't either. I also don't know. Question my daughter had.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we were just like,
Be like, let's go
not
look
sure.
that up together.
Yeah, let's look it up. Mama don't know. I have no idea.
And that's a beautiful moment to share. There was one little girl this morning. She hugged her book and she said, I can't wait to read this with my mom. I thought I was going to melt on us. Oh, it's my first day back in school. She about to make me cry. But it let me know that her and her mother read together, have conversations, because some of the kids, they were like tearing into it in class. She was like, I can't wait to read this with my mom, because I read them the first chapter in class. Yeah, so I saw another question. Is that where that came from?
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, so I have some supplemental information for educators. If there are any educators and librarians here, I know I already got her. As soon as she came in, I was like, here. That again, foster conversations around some of these topics. The other thing that I'm doing, and because this is launch night, y'all are the first to know, is I have a website that is dedicated just to Frankie, and kids will be able to submit their own news stories.
I love that.
To
Written
Frankie.
news stories are like, because Frankie is a TV journalist.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're going to do written news stories. Now that schools are back open, Frankie's going to be able to go back to school, so we'll have the school newspaper, right? I mean, it's an opportunity, I think, to talk about all the many layers of media and media literacy, right? So I want to get into digital media. I want to get into written media. I really want kids to understand the power of journalism in all its many, many forms.
You are speaking my language, Christine. It's amazing. It's just like, what's happening? Okay, last questions.
And thank you all, too, for coming out on a Tuesday night. This is a tough time of the week, so thank y'all for coming out. Book 4. Book 4. The Case of the Missing Sock.
Okay.
We do a lot with that book. So yes, I go into social media, and even this morning, I had the kids take pictures with their books, and I said, you have to cover your faces. Some of the kids had media releases, some of them didn't. If one kid in the class don't have a media release, I don't fool with it, right? Because I do respect parents' privacy. And so they were like, why? And I said, do y'all know how many followers I have? So then they were guessing. They were like, 1,000, 2,000.
More than that.
And so I tell them the number of followers, and I said, how do you think your parents would feel knowing that all those people saw your face and they didn't give permission? One little kid said, my parent will be excited. I'm going to go viral. And I was like,
Oh my God.
and I said, it is.
That is where
and
we
I
are.
said, this is, in my, didn't say this out loud, but I was like, see, this is exactly why I wrote that book for the way that I did. So yes, to your point, I address, social responsibility online as well, right? Talking about privacy, talking about the sharing of information, talking about forming a caption that is honest, because you can imagine, they're debating about whether it's the washer or the dryer. Somebody wants to post something. You post something and it's incorrect, you can have the whole world thinking that socks are eating the dryer. Mm-hmm. And then what happens, And so I do address it in a very kid-friendly way, and throughout the series, just expand upon that. Yes. Again, when I first started writing it, I that wasn't the focus. Media literacy was not the focus of the book. I want to be very honest about that. It wasn't until I started doing research and finding folks like Alice, right? Reading the statistics online about just how poorly we are doing with media literacy, reading blog posts from educators saying we have got to teach children media literacy. Like, this is a problem in our country. I saw this opportunity. And, you know, my motto, storytelling for social change. And this is an opportunity for us to really bring about social change, I think, in our society, and getting young people to understand the power of media literacy, the responsibility that comes with the media, right? I think so often things are shared without much thought behind it, right? So often things are told to one another. We talked about the difference between really telling a story or gossiping, you know, like all of these things. I just felt like it was such an opportunity to embrace that. And so that became the focus of the series. But it started with this book, with book one, and seeing there's an opportunity here for this to really be a teaching tool for parents and educators, and to empower young readers. And I'm really proud of it.
Thank you.
Oh, wait,
so
we
much.
have one more.
We have one more question.
I do not. No. No. Unfortunately, I don't.
But there could be a character at some point in some of your books that.
You know, I think it's, you know, I have Dan, the teddy bear, he's ADD inattentive, like my daughter. And I do think it's really important that authors who can really speak to that experience. I have a real big thing about own voices, right? And I don't want to write for an audience that I'm not familiar with just because I'm gonna fill this gap. Oh, I see. So, you know what I mean? And I do think that there are authors who are
Someone who can step in.
who can really step in and who can really own that story and allow autistic children to see themselves in a way that I would only be able to do by maybe doing some research here and there. You know what I mean? I really think some stories should be own voices stories.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So just a couple of quick instructions. So we are having the book signing right out in the hallway. See all these books out here, so thank you. But right in the hallway here, we'll have you come out and sign.
Okay.
But again, thank you all for coming out, and give it up one more time for our amazing author tonight.
Thank you. And for the amazing Helena.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Thank you.